Yeah, so today it will be about SAT journey, roundtable discussion, and by the title, you can already tell that this is going to be something that's a little bit different from the webinars that we used to do. So for the past month, we did several webinars. I think one of them was focused on the transition from I think the paper-based SAT to digital SAT, and then the other one is focused on kind of the method of improving your score. But in this process, we have always realized the SAT preparation is not only about improving your score. It's not only about taking a box toward college admission, even though they are the very important factors and are our priorities. But we still realize SAT preparation journey is also about growth. It is also about learning. So we really want to be here today to share with you about SAT journey as a whole. And more oftentimes, students are not the only people who are involved in this preparation. Families are always there, and families are always a source of support. So today we actually have our guests over here. We have two sets of families who have been Think Academy students and who have really scored top score, about around 1550 in the SAT. So they're actually here to share their personal experiences with everyone. And I'm going to start with my personal introduction first. My name is Kelly, and I graduated my master's from Learning Design Technology at Stanford and my psychology from University of Southern California. And in the past, I took exam in SSAT, PSAT, SAT, and GRE. So I was once in students' shoe and have been through a lot of the struggles that students are currently finding at the moment. So it feels really meaningful to be working at Think Academy Test Prep and to help students empower them on this journey of SAT preparation and helping them toward their college admission. So yeah, this is about me, but today it's actually about our guests. So we have Jennifer's mom, and also Katie and Katie's mom over here. So thank you so much for being here today, and thank you so much for your time. And we will have our families introduce themselves first. And let's start with Katie.
Hi, my name is Katie. I'm a rising senior at Lynbrook High School in San Jose. So I took Think Academy classes, the one-on-one classes, from October 2022, and I took the SAT in November, and I scored a 1560.
That's awesome. And welcome, Katie and Katie's mom. And next we have Jennifer and Jennifer's mom over here. So can Jennifer introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah. Hi, guys. I'm Jennifer. Okay. Hi, I'm Jennifer, and I just ended my sophomore year, so now I'm a rising junior. And I took the SAT in the March of 2023 for the first time, and my score was 1540.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing the information and also the stats. I guess let's start with the very first question about when did you start SAT preparation and kind of what opportunity propelled you to start preparing for the SAT? Because when we are having conversations with a lot of families as well as students, I think finding that starting point about actually entering exam prep is actually something that they are thinking about from very early on, but just cannot figure out what is the exact time point that they should start preparing for it. So I believe it would be really valuable to hear both of your experiences on when you started the journey. And we will be starting with Katie. What is your starting point for SAT preparation?
Yeah. So I personally started in the fall and the summer of my junior year. And I think what really motivated me to start thinking about the SAT more, even though I've heard about it I think my entire high school career. Everybody talks about it, especially in junior year. So I think in those few months before I took in November, I was preparing for the PSAT, which was just a month before in October. And I think knowing that that was coming up propelled me to start studying more dedicatedly for a few months prior to that.
That's awesome. And what about Jennifer? What was your starting point for SAT preparation?
So I started prepping for my SAT during the fall of my sophomore year, around October. And how I started prepping for it was because my mom actually just spontaneously discovered Think Academy's SAT one-on-one courses, since my younger brother already took regular math courses at Think Academy. So I think this was really fortunate for me, because even though my starting point was a little earlier than normal, I felt ready, and yeah, that was my starting point.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because I heard like the key word about like ready, and I think taking it in sophomore year might not be as common as a lot of like students who take it in like junior year or even later. But I realized that recent years there has been like a trend that students actually take SAT classes or like SAT exams much earlier on. And I think the concept that you mentioned about like as long as you are ready, I just want to hear like what you think about ready. Like what do you think ready means when you can start like SAT preparation?
Yeah, so for one, I think doing it during sophomore year is actually a really good idea, especially for me, because I know that going into junior year, I'm going to have a much busier schedule with like harder classes, like AP classes, and a bigger workload in school. And so considering all of that, doing and prepping for the SAT during sophomore year is going to be way less stressful. And as to like how ready you are, I would say taking a diagnostic test is always a good idea. That's what I did for myself. And when I took the diagnostic test, I felt pretty like comfortable with the questions. Obviously, I didn't have as high of a score as I did, but I felt like this is something that I could work towards for sure. And it wasn't too intimidating for me.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And I also wanted to hear like Katie's thoughts on like taking SAT in like sophomore year, because you took it in junior year. And could you share like the pros and cons of taking it in junior year so people can get like a more complete perspective on when you should start thinking about SAT preparation?
Yeah. I think definitely like Jennifer just mentioned, my junior year, there's like a much heavier workload than my sophomore year. And especially since I took the SAT in the first semester, I was kind of getting used to my classes. And that was like a lot on to balance on my plate during those few months. So I definitely think that if I had, taken in sophomore year and been like more ready at that time, I think it would have saved me. It would have been a lot easier for me to prioritize the SAT over my schoolwork, as that was something I really struggled with in those few months. But I think one pro of taking a junior year is obviously you have more experience coming out of sophomore year. And then also if you do, summer coursework, I think definitely by that time in junior year, you're probably more prepared in terms of reading and math to take the SAT.
Definitely, because I think in terms of like to assess when you are ready or when you're capable, like a huge factor will be like math. Like if you have finished, for example, like algebra 2 in your sophomore year or even like freshman year, so like that could be used as a benchmark to assess like whether you are ready for the SAT content. So to officially kind of recap on what we just said about like when you should start SAT preparation, I think it's all about like pacing, because if we really look at the full picture about the road to college admission, there are actually 3 parts that we need to pay attention to. I think one of them is academics, including standardized testing scores, AP classes, or even college classes. And then there is also the part about like extracurricular activities like volunteer research projects. And finally, the application process itself, I think during junior and senior year, about like portfolio, essay, and everything about that admission process. So I think to really evaluate when you should take it, kind of put it in a timeline to see how you can actually finish everything in the 4 years. And if you feel ready and capable to take it earlier, like in freshman year, sophomore year, you should totally do that. It's really encouraged. But if you don't feel that ready, or if your like math level or like reading level feel like you need more work, I think it's definitely okay to kind of have more time to work on it. But it really depends on pacing and everyone's situation. Yeah, so moving on to like the next part, I think after we figure out like when should be like a starting point for SAT preparation, the important thing is about goal setting. Like how did you go about setting an SAT score goal? And what is the process for like parents and students to establish expectations collaboratively? Because when I was having conversations with a lot of parents and students, I realized that that point was the point when parents are involved in the process, trying to provide advice on like what score you should get or like what is the expectation. So I think it would be really valuable to hear both of your perspectives on like the process that you had been through about goal setting and then about like establishing like expectations with parents. So yeah, let's start with Katie. Like how did you set a target score and what was your target score?
Yeah. So I think my target score was the lower 1500s, around 1520. We left it kind of broad just to like not put too much pressure on any one score. But I think the most important part in deciding that was the diagnostic test. I think after the diagnostic test, I really knew where I stood in terms of the SAT, and then I could kind of decide how much I could realistically improve in the time that I had before I had to take it in November. So yeah, I think the lower 1500s were where we landed on with that. And I think over the course of the few months, as I kept improving, we kind of like shifted that and recalibrated based on what I believed was, possible in terms of improvement, and also with like the Think Academy classes. And yeah, I think some factors we took into consideration were definitely college admission profiles, just kind of looking at the colleges I kind of wanted to go to and seeing what the SAT score range was there. And yeah, I think those were the two most important parts.
Yeah, I think oftentimes it is easy to find college stats because they are like public online. But where would you like suggest that students go look for like students' college admission profiles? Like any place to look for those?
I'm personally not aware of anything too broad, but I think in terms of my school, we are able to use a program to see where other students in my school have gone to college and what they scored on their SAT and what GPA they had. So I think that's something I definitely kept in consideration when I was setting my goal.
Got it. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective and also resources. And I think the next part would be like establishing expectations with mom. And could you and like your mom share about like the process of you kind of reaching an agreement on like what is the goal score that you should work on during that process?
Yeah, I would like to say just Katie just mentioned in first get the idea on the result of the diagnostic test, and also pay close attention and observe how she's doing in the first couple weeks of the practice, and also with the one-on-one teachers with Think Academy, and get some feedback from the teachers. From the Think Academy teachers. And to try to set up a goal and reasonable, reachable, but still requires some effort. And also, and then I think we'll set up a range rather than any particular specific score. And also the range will be like within the student's psychological a level, and make it like a comfortable enough, but still have motivated to go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah, because I think the sentence over here kind of summarizes what you just said about like setting a goal that is reachable, but also requires effort so that it pushes the kid a little bit and also like unleashes their full potential during the SAT preparation process. Yeah, and next we will be moving on to like Jennifer, because I think Jennifer and her mom kind of established that goal a little bit differently because it was more like a collaborative process from the very start. So could Jennifer and your mom share a little bit about like how you guys come to the SAT goal?
Yeah, so after my diagnostic test, honestly, I wasn't very familiar with like how the SAT was scored. So my mom kind of like helped me with that. We knew that we definitely wanted to get above a 1500, but we didn't set any specific specific goals like 1550 or whatever. But something that we did use to kind of get a gauge on what score we wanted was college admission stats, and also my a level, because my diagnostic was like in the 1400s. And so we knew that we could like improve by a certain amount. But during my actual prep, we didn't really like have a specific score that we had in mind, because I feel like for one, that puts a lot of pressure on yourself, which can be negative for your mental health, but also it could just like kind of limit yourself to while you're prepping for the SAT. And so I think my mom and we collaboratively set a goal above 1500, but we didn't like put too much pressure on myself because we knew that would not have the best effect on me.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, if I may chime in with a few words, that we don't have a specific goal set. And the common message that I've been using is that try your best and try to get the highest score as high as you can. And the general believing is that it has to be decent enough and you feel that you are happy, okay with it, but not being too obsessed with a perfect score. Try your best, do your best, and be happy with what you get. That's our goal.
That's awesome, because I think that was something that we all want to promote is actually like health prior to actually getting that achievement. So that is the most important thing to like maintain like healthy attitude throughout the process, but also trying to achieve what's the best for you and your like full capability, right? Yeah, so like to kind of recap on like the advice on setting goals and as well as expectations, I think both Katie and Jennifer kind of mentioned the importance of understanding where you are first. For example, like taking a diagnostic test will help you to determine your like score range that you could aim for. And then like having a general goal at first will give you like a sense of purpose and serves as a source of motivation, but nothing like a very exact number that you could get obsessed with. That's the important thing. And I think throughout the process, you could regularly adjust your goal to make sure that it's realistic and matching your performance throughout the process. And I think in terms of the collaborative goal setting process, it is important to communicate openly between like the parents and also the students, because I think Jennifer and Katie both mentioned about like communicating like where you got the information and also like the trust that you have for each other in this process. It's really important. And I think finally it is to focus on the effort rather than that specific number. As long as we are seeing improvements, it means that we are working hard and our efforts are paying off. So I think that's more important than really reaching that, for example, like 50-80 that we have in mind. So that is going to be more effective. Yeah, I think the next part, I think after we have a goal in mind, the next step is normally to prepare for the SAT and to have like a concrete SAT prep plan. So I think the next question would be for like the students, like what did you do during SAT preparation? So I think we can get started with Katie's SAT preparation process as well as timeline. So the students in our audiences have more of an idea on when they should start and what kind of strategies they should utilize.
Yeah. So as I said before, it kind of started with me prepping for the PSAT. And I think for about the few months leading up to that, I was trying to self-study. I was trying to like use the big SAT books and mock tests online to kind of try just my best to like find my mistakes and like try to improve my score. But I think the issue with that is that I didn't have a lot of structure. I struggled a lot with time management, especially like during the school year. And yeah, it wasn't like really working for me a lot. The improvement, I didn't see much improvement. And just trying to find my mistakes by myself without having someone there to kind of guide me or to like kind of help point out very specific mistakes and like help me give like advice to how to fix them. I think the whole process just didn't like work very well for me. So I think when I started with the Think Academy classes, the one-on-one classes gave me a lot of like structure and organization. The scheduled classes helped me, be more dedicated and more consistent in terms of my practice. And they also like helped me point out my mistakes, like I said, and give advice on how to like fix them and questions that like I could specifically work on that would, pinpoint that mistake and help me improve. And then I think one other thing I did when I was taking the Think Academy classes on the side, my mom and I kind of developed this like consistent practice system. So what I would do is I would come home from school and I would sit at the dinner table for about 15 to 30 minutes every day. And I would just do, a passage or two or 15 to 20 math problems. And I think that really helped me keep me more consistent doing daily practice. And also, I think one thing we did is that we really tried to pinpoint the spots that I needed to improve on. So for math, we did like maybe 15, 20 problems. I didn't have much issue with that. So then we kind of put that to the side and we focused more on reading. And then if there were, if I was getting more problems wrong on the history sections, we'd repeat that. If I was getting more wrong on the science sections, we repeat that. And I think doing that every day and kind of readjusting every day, the practice that I did was really helpful because also I got to see more direct improvement instead of doing a huge mock test. If I got like if I went from 5 problems wrong to 3 problems wrong to 1 problem wrong, I saw a lot of improvement there. And I think that was very constructive in prepping for the SAT.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you for like walking us through that entire process. And I think I'm going to bring us back a little bit. And I would love to ask you the question, like why you decided to do like self-study at first, like what motivated you to utilize self-study as the strategy to prepare for like SAT as well as PSAT exam.
I think I didn't know a whole lot about the PSAT and SAT. You hear about it a lot, both from parents and from other students, but honestly, I didn't have too much of an idea of how difficult the questions were, if there were like nuances, because sometimes the SAT questions can look quite like common sense. They can look quite easy. Other times they're like kind of trickier. And I think that like kind of that lack of clarity in terms of like types of questions made me think that, I can just self-study, I'll figure it out myself. Can't be too hard. It's just like a list of a lot of multiple choice questions. They're all kind of the same. So I thought, it can't be too hard to self-study. But I think definitely I did need the structure and more clarification on like the specific types of questions when it came to prepping.
Awesome. And another follow-up question that I have, I think a lot of students are curious about this as well, because I think a lot of students kind of compare SAT with PSAT exam. And what made you decide to utilize SAT self-study as a way to prepare for PSAT instead of like focusing on PSAT or focusing on SAT right away?
Yeah, for me, looking back, the PSAT and the SAT were quite similar in terms of the difficulty and in terms of the types of questions, like the format's the same. And I think, studying for the PSAT, one motivated me to start studying for the SAT, given that I was taking it a month later. And also just the experience of sitting in that room, taking an actual exam, going through like, the whole proctoring process and just, kind of feeling that stress and pressure of taking an actual test, sitting there for 3 hours. I think that helped me mentally prepare for the SAT. So like when I went into the SAT exam a month later, I kind of knew what to expect. I felt a bit calmer about it. So I think overall it was a good preparation for the exam.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I guess my takeaway from this is that to prepare for the PSAT, SAT could be a good way, like a good starting point, just to utilize like SAT preparation so that the preparation can serve both PSAT exam as well as SAT exam, right? Awesome. So yeah, could you share like some takeaways from your SAT preparation journey, like the whole timeline process?
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing's the short and consistent practice was really helpful for me. I think just because sometimes I have difficulty, just sitting there for 3 hours and trying to get started, just doing a mock test because, like 3 hours is a long amount of time. If you're sitting at home and trying to focus for that long of a period, it can be difficult, especially when you have other things on your plate, like schoolwork, other things. And I think the short practice at the end of school every single day, just getting started on like a couple problems, but like, like doing it every day and being consistent about it, helped me like keep the SAT in mind. Like it kind of prevented me from slacking off and like accidentally prioritizing schoolwork over it. And I think, that was a lot easier to handle. And I really thank my mom for helping me out with that because we worked together a lot for that. And then also after I did the practice, just kind of reflecting on my mistakes and then trying to readjust my study plan according to, what I was improving on and what I wasn't improving on was really helpful. Just like target very specific areas instead of trying to like cast the wide net. Targeting specific areas helped me really like see where I was like improving and like I could see very distinctly my successes in one area. And then when I took the mock test, I could like tell where I had like, previously struggled on and didn't really understand. I now understood a lot better. And I think those are the main things that come to mind.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I already see some like questions popping up in the chat. And I think at the end, we will answer all of the questions together. So you can feel free to shoot the questions in the chat and we will be answering them later. And let's move on to like Jennifer's prep timeline as well as the process. Could you walk us through kind of like when you did what and like how was each of the stages?
Yeah, so I immediately started with the Think Academy SAT classes. There were 10 one-on-one classes in total, and the homework for each class was to finish a whole set of a mock test. So I started that in October 2022, and the original goal for me was to take my SAT in December. However, since I had such a busy schedule, I wasn't always able to take the one-on-one classes every single week. And so by December, I did not complete all 10 of my one-on-one classes. And so Think Academy was kind enough to let me extend my classes into January. And so I finished my one-on-one classes by the end of January, and my SAT was scheduled for March. And during the one-on-one classes with Think Academy, I think I really enjoyed them because, as Katie said, they definitely gave me structure. So being able to like hold yourself accountable, or have someone else hold you accountable actually, because you had that one-on-one class, was very helpful for me. And then back to the timeline, I finished my one-on-one classes by the end of January, and then I felt like I was just like, I've done so many mock tests that it was time for me to just like take a little bit of a break from the SAT. So I took like a 2-week-ish break from the SAT just to like clear my mind. But then after that, like 2 weeks before my actual SAT test, that's when I really like got back onto the SAT train, and I like really grinded. And during those last 2 weeks before my SAT prep, as someone who had a really busy schedule, I did have to deprioritize some of my other activities in order to prep for the SAT. So for example, like my extracurriculars, my classes, I would have to like, instead of going to them for that 1 week, I just did mock tests by myself at home. So yeah, that was leading up to the SAT.
That's awesome. Thank you for like sharing that whole process, even though like the break kind of like hit you like during the process, like there was like exam stress and stuff. I'm really glad that you actually took a break and to kind of relieve yourself from all that stress. And I was curious, for that like 2-week break, did you do anything related to SAT preparation, like even lighter stuff, or it was completely kind of like a complete break to clear your mind about the SAT exam?
It was actually a complete break. But I will say, I don't think I like lost anything. I don't think I lost any of the content that I learned from the one-on-one classes, just because it wasn't too long of a break. And also the fundamentals that you learn from the one-on-one classes, like it's really hard for you to lose. Once you like know the questions and know the style of questions, it really just like stays in your brain. You don't have to like really consistently try to keep on doing so many mock tests constantly.
Thanks. And I just have like a follow-up question that I'm curious about, like what section on the SAT do you think it's the hardest for you personally?
For me, it was definitely the reading section. The math section was quite easy for me. Even during the diagnostic, I got like every question correct. And I think that's partly because it goes up to the level of like Algebra 2. So once you've taken Algebra 2, you're pretty much like set to go for the math. But for me, the reading and writing sections were quite difficult because a lot of the questions were, in my opinion, subjective, and you really have to like be able to interpret a passage. But yeah, and also the writing, I think I was missing some of like the fundamentals, like semicolons and that kind of stuff, but that's really easy to gain because once you like know how to use a semicolon and like grammatical kind of things, you just like, you know it forever. So that was good.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, because I feel like the problems that you just described are the problems of a lot of students over here. Like they also find like the reading section, the writing section to be a little bit more challenging compared with the math section. So in terms of the overall process, would you have like any takeaways to share with the audiences?
Yes. So yeah, definitely understand which sections you're strong at and which sections you're weak at. For me, that was strong in math, weak in reading. So like Katie said, I would recommend if you're short on time, especially, to just focus on your weak points and really like try to improve that side of your score, because that's where you'll see the most improvement. But also don't overlook your strong areas, because for me, I knew that math was my strong suit. So during the last few weeks, I would really cram in a lot of reading practices and not as much math sections. But during my actual SAT, I did get 2 math questions wrong, which I normally would have gotten right. So I definitely recommend to just like keep in the back of your mind that you have to not be overconfident and still like look into your strong points as well.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And like, I remember that you sharing with me how you would like utilize some like fragmented time for SAT practice. Like, how did you do it?
Yeah, back to like me having a busy schedule, like in order to complete like my mock test as homework, like sometimes in class, if I was like done with all my work and the teacher was like, okay, you can like do regular whatever homework you want, I would just like do my SAT homework, because just like utilizing all the time I can, like even at like my extracurricular classes, if I had some free time, I would just pull out my computer and start doing some SAT homework. I think just like utilizing all the time you can will really help you in the long run.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think this will be like a question for all of you, like including the 2 moms over here. So if you could go back in time, what would you do differently in terms of SAT preparation? Yeah, and we can have Jennifer and your mom start first.
Okay, for me, if I could go back in time, I would focus on my math just a bit more, just to make sure I could get like every single question on the math section right, because I know that's within my capabilities personally. So yeah.
I think for me, probably it's along the same line. Both of us probably were too overconfident about her math. I probably should send her a reminder that just be careful on those questions, making sure you're not missing anything.
Thank you for that. And what about Katie and Katie's mom?
I think for me, if I could go back, I would probably try to take the SAT earlier in my sophomore year, just because like just trying to balance my junior year coursework with the SAT, and also because I was taking new AP classes. I was kind of trying to figure out how to do well in those classes. Trying to balance that with the SAT was really difficult for me. So I definitely think that if I had prepared earlier and been able to take it in sophomore year, I would have.
Yeah, and what about Katie's mom?
Yeah, I would say, I will have Katie to complete the whole SAT, the 3 hours, the whole mock test, like 10 days before the actual exam day. For this time, we didn't do any complete set of the SAT exam, for even once. So, and then the longest time she did on the test is only half hour. So I would say if I got a chance, and then to let her get more familiar with the real exam setting, and then get a better sense and the time control. Because right after the exam, and then Katie mentioned, reading is kind of like a time crunch, and then I finished all the questions, but it's so rushed in the last passage, and then for the actual result, it turns out she get the questions the wrong questions down in the row, and a few questions just in the last passage. I think this pretty much is time could be a issue. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are like super valuable advice from like students who have already been through everything. So thank you so much for sharing your personal stories as well as like SAT journey. And I guess the next part would be about like prep process and how parents are kind of involved in this process, because we all know that like standardized testing preparation could be like boring, tedious a lot of the times. So I think the question to ask over here is to like,
对不对？也很冰
sorry,
凉。
I think someone is
应该
on
再买一个草莓，可以打草莓牛奶哦。
Yeah, so I think the question to ask over here is how to stay motivated during the stressful prep, and what kind of support can parents actually provide that could help students to maintain that level of motivation. So yeah, we could hear from Katie first about like your intrinsic motivation, like stressors, as well as the strategies you utilize to overcome the stress.
Yeah. So I think my motivation was just, the SAT is a pretty big milestone in your high school career. So I think I was just thinking, if I can finish this, if I take the test, if I do well, I'll be kind of done with that and never have to think about it again. So I think, yeah, just that kept me driven over those few months. And as I mentioned before, I think the biggest stressor was trying to balance my coursework, my schoolwork with the SAT. And I did struggle to prioritize the SAT at times. Trying to just find like slots of time where I could practice the SAT was difficult. And I think in those kind of moments where I felt really frustrated, either I wasn't seeing improvement or just it was a lot to balance and I didn't have enough time to keep practicing for the SAT. I try to take a break, try to step back because I feel like when I've hit a wall and when I feel frustrated, just continuously, going at it and keep hitting the same wall, it doesn't really do much. So, I tried to take a step back, take a break for a little bit, not really think about the SAT and then come back to it with a fresh mind and a new perspective on how to proceed, which, are areas I should improve on and, maybe try to revamp my study plan a little bit in a way that makes it a little less stressful, a little easier to balance. And also just keeping track of my successes and, looking at things that if I haven't improved in this section, I still have in this other section. So, at the end of the day, it might not be perfect, but I have done something. I have come a long way since the beginning. And I think that's important to remember when you're on a pretty long, month-long journey.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. That's super empowering to focus on the positive aspects of the SAT preparation journey. And I know that you mentioned mom was a huge source of help during the process. So could Katie's mom introduce how you kind of helped Katie establish that study plan that you worked on?
Yeah, when we look back, I thought that couple months of to prepare the SAT is a good bonding time. So basically, I try to put myself as a cheerleader, as a facilitator, and also as a companionship to with Katie. Yes, so I think the thing is try to help her to be assistant rather than the one as a guidance. Yeah, and also I would say let the student be on their driver's seat. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think this just demonstrated how a good method of helping Katie could be a huge source of help for Katie's preparation journey. And it was super effective because it was proven by Katie's performance on the exam, but also Katie's feedback. It was motivating, it was helpful. So thank you so much for sharing the strategy. And for Jennifer, what was your intrinsic motivation and stressors as well as the strategies you utilized?
Well, obviously something that kept me motivated was getting a good score. And also by getting a good score, it would make my hard work pay off. And it would also mean that I wouldn't have to take the SAT again, because taking a 3-hour-long test, that is a very tiring and very exhausting thing to do. So one big motivator for me was not having to do it again. I just want to get it done as early as possible and do the best that I can. That was my biggest motivator. Some things that really stressed me out were my school workload as well as the time constraints of the test. I'm sure I'll have a bigger workload this year, but even sophomore year, I did have a lot of schoolwork and extracurriculars that I had to balance along with SAT prep. And also for me personally, taking the SAT, finishing all the questions in the reading section was always a problem for me in the time constraint. And so one strategy that I used to increase the speed of my reading and the speed that I answer questions is that I would section off each passage to 13 minutes. So that if I was taking too long on one passage and I was going over 13 minutes, I would know to move on to the next passage, because I didn't want to focus too much on one passage and then not have enough time for the last few passages. So it's always a good idea to keep that in mind. Another good strategy is honestly to take a break. I know it's not always easy to take a break for people, because you may think oh, I should be doing as much practice as I can constantly. But in reality, taking a break is actually really good for your headspace. And honestly, just cramming in too much SAT prep without any break could actually do the opposite of what you wanted to do, because you'll end up feeling burnt out and way too stressed.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And what about like Jennifer's mom? Like how were were you involved in like Jennifer's prep process?
Sure. I truly believe that the journey is really under the kids themselves determination. They're the boss, they self-drive for their path. So from my side, I would just do high-level check-ins to making sure that everything is on the right track towards the right direction, and roughly manage the schedules to make sure that those works. On the other piece, on the other perspective is that I feel that as a parent, we could be the catalyst. So it's really checking on their status when they are really too stressed. It's really time for us to observe those signs and let them know you can relax a little bit, don't burn yourself. Well, on the other hand, when they are too laid back, too relaxed, it's a good time to remind them that please wake up and back on the track again. So the key is to keep the balance.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I think both Jennifer's mom and Katie's mom kind of share a lot of common things in terms of parental involvement, that is like support, that is trust, that is also respecting the kids' autonomy in that test preparation journey. So we really appreciate you sharing that with the parents community, as well as like sharing like the students' perspective as well. So thank you so much for that. And the last part will actually be focused on the academic portion about like test taking experience, as well as like the strategies you utilize during the actual test. So the question here is what strategies you learned were the most helpful during the actual test. So talking about the real test experience. And I think the last question would be like, how has SAT prepped you in the long run? Because we all know that SAT is only a small part in one's life, even though it is a pretty big thing during the college admission journey. So these are the two questions that we will be talking about in the next portion. And for the first, we will have Katie start with like kind of the strategies as well as kind of the impact on the long term.
Yeah, I think one specific strategy that comes to the top of my head that really helped me through the Think Academy classes was for the paired passages, reading passage 1 first and answering those questions, then reading passage 2 and then those questions, and then doing the questions together. And I think long term, yeah, definitely perseverance and just determination through a 3-hour test, something that, was quite repetitive, just doing that, like all that practice over the course of a few months. I think that is really applicable to not only in the more short term, like AP tests. AP exams are similar in that there's like 3 hours, you sit in a room, you have to do, kind of tedious, repetitive questions. And then I think, yeah, my SAT prep definitely helped me be more focused during AP examinations. And then even more long run, just like being able to sit through like lots of coursework, lots of schoolwork, even when you're really tired. I think SAT prep really did help me for that. And yeah.
Yeah, and I think Katie's mom was also really involved in that whole process. So like from your perspective, what do you think like SAT prep had the long-term impact on Katie, but also like on you personally? So could you share with the audiences?
Yeah, I would like to say this is a good chance to build up the good habit of study. So, and then Katie studies plan on the SATs basically to break down the SAT homework and the self-study practice and into a bite-sized daily study plan. So whenever she get home from school, and she will spend like 15 to 20 minutes to study the SAT, do the homework, and review the wrong questions. Yeah, and I think the challenging part to make it as the daily practice and keep it consistent. So, and it turns out it's a good habit building.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And moving on to Jennifer, like what about you? What kind of like strategies do you find the most helpful? And also like what kind of long-term impact the SAT preparation had on you?
Yeah, so as I said before, with time management, I'm going to reiterate that sectioning off the reading passages to 13 minutes, that really helped me personally. And then also, since everything is multiple choice, you can definitely use process of elimination. Like, for example, the writing section, there are some vocab questions. So if you don't know every single one of the words, if you know some of them, you can just like eliminate the ones that you do know are wrong. That's really helpful. For my long-term things that the SAT prep helped with me, helped my vocabulary, helped my reading speed for sure, since you just have to read so many passages in such a short amount of time. And also sitting through a 3-hour-long test that requires a lot of attention. So as someone whose attention span kind of went down since distance learning, doing a lot of SAT prep, especially for me, since I had to like time myself. So I like to do full mock tests, which were really long. That really helped my attention span. And as Katie said, they are very similar to AP exams for sure.
Awesome, thank you. And what about Jennifer's mom?
SAT exam is one of the first steps to prepare for college application. So it's a really good a task for kids and the parents to understand how it goes. During this process, I hope Jennifer gained some confidence and I gained some confidence for her as well. And both are motivated to be active to prepare for the college journey. The belief that we learn here is that when you pay your efforts, you can see the gain, you can see the improvement, and then that at the same time will encourage the kids and the family to work hard on the journey. So I think this is a really good start of this long, challenging journey for college preparation.
Thank you so much. Because as you said, I think SAT as a standardized testing is a really good way to build students' academic efficacy. Because for standardized testing, if you pay efforts, it will definitely pay off in the score, in your performance, as well as like the capability in general. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And for the final part, for the share out, like it will be something different. Like what would you say to other parents or students? And for this round, I'll have like Jennifer and Katie share something that they would like to say to the parent community. And I'll have Jennifer and Katie's mom share like something they want to say to the students. So yeah, this will be something different. And let's start with Jennifer.
Okay, so something I would say to other parents is to support your student in the best of your ability, because even though I know every parent wants their child to get the highest score that they can, it's always important to keep in mind that in order to achieve that, the best like strategy is not to place pressure on the student, but rather to motivate them through encouraging them and like making sure that they're trying their best rather than like reaching a specific goal. Because I really think that placing too much pressure on a student is going to do the opposite of what parents intend to. So supporting your student and not like criticizing them for not getting to a certain like goal is very important in my opinion.
Thank you. And what about Katie? Like, what would you like to say to the parents?
Yeah, along similar lines, I would say like definitely communicating and like respecting what the student might be saying about their own capabilities is really important. I think if students are normally pretty stressed during the high school years and with like all that they have to balance on their plate, they usually are very stressed and they know they have a limit, they know when they need a break. So I think when students kind of voice that maybe they need to step back, parents could definitely like respect that and also just communicate a way that's like best for the students to kind of preserve their mental health while also continuing forward with their like academic journey.
Thank you. And for Katie's mom, like what would you like to say to the students out there?
I would say so this is the good chance to build up the time management skill, and then for the students in the junior or even in the sophomore year is also so busy the high school life, and how to handle the additional task on the already playful daily schedule. Yeah, I say, and then to set the priorities and to set up a goal, and then how to achieve the goal in the short term and midterm.
Thank you. And finally, like Jennifer's mom, what would you like to say to the students out there?
Sure. This will be along the lines that Katie just mentioned. Communication is really important, but I want to call out that communication is a two-way activity. So to students, please believe that all your parents truly want to do the very best for you. So remember to talk to your parents, share your joy, share your progress, but more importantly, share your difficulties, challenges, and stress. And only with this open conversation, we can help each other. We understand each other, we can help each other. That's how we make it work to the very best overall. So the key point is, let's talk.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing that. I felt so inspired. Like, I thank you so much for inspiring me as a daughter, as like a teacher out here, but also like inspiring a lot of the parents and students who are actually listening to this webinar. So thank you so much for sharing your personal stories and also the advice. And I think as all of you have kind of said, like SAT preparation journey was a very long and tedious process. And it is also like a good opportunity to kind of like build up your academic capability, but also to kind of take a box in the SAT, like in the college admission journey. So I think the next part, it will be that we will share a lot of information about our summer courses. And it's really, it makes me super excited to see a lot of students already like kind of starting on this journey and enrolled in our summer camp and ready for the SAT prep. And we are actually only 5 days away from the official start of our summer classes. And just to recap on like what will be there in the summer camp, it will be 30 hours of small group live lessons. And in addition, there will be 5 hours one-on-one, because both Katie and also Jennifer took the one-on-one classes, but they took it in their like semester. So it was busy, and one-on-one provided them with the flexibility that they could utilize, like in addition to all of the things that they need to balance in terms of like schoolwork, in terms of extracurricular activities. So I think summer will be actually like a perfect time to do like a more focused, more concentrated SAT preparation, to utilize the 30 hours to go over all of the important concepts, as well as question types on the SAT, but also utilize the 5 hours one-on-one to really target on your weak spots and to make improvements on those. And in addition to the instruction time, there will be mock exams, there will be homework help. So practice makes perfect, and practice is a really important thing, as Katie and Jennifer both mentioned in SAT preparation journey. Yeah, so just to introduce our SAT teachers, we have Tommy as our reading teacher, and Brian as our grammar teacher, and Kai as our math teacher. So these will be our teaching team focused on helping you with your SAT prep. And we talked a lot about motivation today, and a lot of intrinsic motivation and motivation that parents could provide to our students. But also from the perspective of teachers and from Think Academy, we also designed a reward system trying to provide that little bit of extrinsic motivation. So if students complete all of the assignments on time, they will receive homework reward of $20 Amazon gift card. And for mock exam, if you score like top 10%, you will get even like a higher amount of Amazon gift card, just to motivate you a little bit more, in addition to that intrinsic motivation that you will get. And finally, we have the special scholarship plan. So if students enrolled in like a Think Academy SAT classes and they have a score that is at least 1450, they will qualify for a scholarship. And I think Jennifer and Katie are all scholarship winners from Think Academy. So congratulations to you. And we would love to see more students actually reaching their SAT goal and also earning that scholarship from Think Academy. And this will be the class information. So the time, as I said, like it will be 5 days away. So like starting on June 24th, and you can scan the QR code to view all of the time and schedules of our classes. And just once more, we only have like 9 spots left for the SAT preparation. And I think summer is actually a perfect time to do focused, dedicated prep. So I really suggest that you take a screenshot and go back to the class if you're interested. And finally, we'll be moving on to the Q&A sections. And I already saw a lot of questions in the chat box. So I will be reading the questions, and I think some of the questions can be answered by our students and parents. So I think let's start with the first one, like how much should I score on diagnostics test to be considered ready if my target score is 1550? Like Jennifer and Katie, like anyone wants to answer this question?
I would say it's different for everyone, but I can share for me personally. my diagnostic, I think, was 1450-ish. And so I guess it improved by 90. So keeping that in mind, I feel like you should, instead of like using the score as a gauge, I feel like you should like look at how you feel during the test. Like, did you feel like the questions were hard for you? Did you feel like you were pressed for time? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, Katie, anything to add on to it?
Yeah, I think also one thing to keep in mind is maybe how much time you have before you actually take the SAT, because that also plays a large factor into how much you can actually improve, and how like much your score can go up in that time period.
Awesome. Yeah, and just to add on to that from the perspective of like a SAT teacher, I think for that 1550, it's also important to see like what kind of things you got wrong on the diagnostic test, because some of the questions are easier to fix compared with the other. For example, like math concepts or like grammar concepts, those are a quick fix. But if it is like reading method or like vocabulary, it might take a little bit longer to fix. So instead of only looking at that score or like how much you get, also look at the breakdown and specifically like what kind of question types that you got wrong during the diagnostic test. So that would be my suggestion. And the next question, what is the format of SAT for paper testing? So for the real test takers out there, do you want to just walk us through kind of the different sections, like really briefly, like what kind of things are on there? Yeah, anyone can answer this.
I can go ahead. So, okay, yeah, for the paper exam, so the first section is the reading section. That is like you read a short passage and then you answer, I think around like 10 questions per passage. I don't exactly remember, but yeah, it's like reading comprehension. And then for the writing section, it's like, you're also reading a passage, except in between like sentences and throughout the passage, there will be like questions on like grammar or like word choice or like meaning. So that's the writing section, and these are all multiple choice. And then there's the math no calculator section, multiple choice as well, and then math with calculator section.
Got it. Just to add on to that, the total time that will take will be around like 3 hours, as both Jennifer and Katie mentioned. So it's a pretty long exam with 3 sections in total, like reading, writing, and language, as well as math. So these will be the thing. And I think the next question could be for Katie, because the parent asked how to prepare PSAT for 9th grade students.
Yeah, so for me personally, I prepare for the PSAT the same way I prepare for the SAT. So just going over actual SAT problems and trying to find improvement there, then taking those mock tests and doing those practice problems. And I think one thing specifically, if the student is a freshman, one thing to keep in mind is that from what I know, the 10th grade PSAT, if you're taking it in 10th grade, doesn't have a whole lot of weight. So it is actually good to treat it as kind of a practice. It's kind of a gauge of how you feel when you're taking a test. Like Jennifer mentioned, like how ready you feel. If there's like some things you find difficult, maybe like time management is a little bit difficult. I think definitely taking that as a gauge of where you're at is a good idea. But other than that, I think preparing for the PSAT is really similar to preparing for the SAT.
Yeah, and okay, talking about the PSAT, I would like to chime in. So for the sophomore, I think so after the PSAT, and then College Board will give each student a very detailed diagnostic report on the actual PSAT, and then they will break down the sections on your weak area and strong area, very detailed report. I would suggest the student and the parents to look into it carefully, and then they will have a good insight for you to prepare for the SAT.
Yeah, thank you for that detailed, because I think it will be really helpful for a lot of like PSAT takers out there, because 9th grade and 10th grade PSAT will be a very common thing for all of the high schoolers out there. Thank you so much for that. And the next question is, Katie, how many practice exams did you do?
So like my mom mentioned earlier, we kind of broke up the practice exams. I didn't do a whole lot of like full mock tests. I think if anything, I did a couple, so maybe like definitely less than like maybe 4 or 5. I would say 4 or 5. And that was like over the course of a few weeks. So there's like, maybe 2 weeks in between just so I could kind of like see how much I improved. But other than that, most of the practice I did were exams that were broken up into sections and different problems. So it was like easier for me to digest and easier for me to balance that with my other schoolwork.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think the next question I could answer that, is there a mock SAT available to take at Think Academy? Yes, we offer mock exams. So feel free to add my WeChat and I can send you a copy of our mock exam so you can know where you are. And if you have already signed up for our SAT camp and still want to take an evaluation, that's perfectly fine. You can see like where you're at. So it is more reasonable to set a goal that is matching your performance and your capability. So yeah, feel free to add my WeChat. And the other question, I guess, could be both of Jennifer and Katie. Like, did both of you use any SAT practice exam books?
For me, I only used the workbooks that Think Academy sent me along with my one-on-one classes. But something that I did do after my one-on-one classes were over is that I would practice on Khan Academy because they provide a lot of mock tests as well, but I did not use any SAT examples.
Yeah, what about Katie?
Yeah, I didn't really use any either. Yeah, like Jennifer, I used the Think Academy workbooks. And then we also used the College Board practice exams.
Awesome, thank you. And the next question will be, will you be attempting the tests again for a better super score, even though they are already at a very high score, like 1540, 1560? So curious about that. Maybe Katie, can you start first?
Yeah, honestly, I think my mom and I are still discussing this right now. It's something that we are thinking about, but just trying to balance, college applications and just the senior coursework. Yeah, but we're not sure yet.
Yeah, what about Jennifer?
So yes, I will be taking my SAT again this August. And yeah, I think because for me, I really do think that for the math, I can get a perfect score. So that's what I'm going to be aiming for. And then as like the question asker said, the super score would be good because the math would be higher.
Awesome. Yeah, and other than classes, how much time you spend on prep every day? Maybe Jennifer can start first.
So like during the school year, okay, other than classes, I would say if I had to average it out, like 30 minutes a day. But honestly, for me, it might be a little bit different because I would just like do it in pretty big chunks, to be honest. I would do my practice mostly on the weekends because that's when I had the most time. Yeah.
Yeah, and what about Katie?
Yeah, for me, it was pretty like consistent, about 20 to 30 minutes every day. Yeah.
Awesome. So I guess like they kind of showed different strategies of preparing for the SAT. It might work for some students to sit in like long mock exams and try to get that practice in. And it might also be more effective for other students to kind of break down that big chunk of practice into like small bits. So it really depends on the student, and finding the strategy that works for you is the most important thing. And I guess the final question, it will be kind of similar with each other. Like it will be about reading and writing as well as vocabulary. So how to prepare for the reading and writing section, and any recommended resources for vocabulary memorization and also like methods of vocabulary memorization. Yeah, and Katie, do you want to share with us?
Yeah, I think for reading, definitely just like going through the passages, trying to figure out, because they usually have this different, like the same formats of questions. And Think Academy provided me with a lot of resources. I think the teachers definitely helped me, figure out, how to navigate certain questions, how to like, close read them and then close read the passage to find the correct answer, because that can be pretty tricky. But yeah, I think just going through the passages and then focusing on the weak points, because like I said, there is a common thread between all the questions. So if you can kind of figure out, where you're making mistakes at, like, if there's a certain question type, focusing on that can really help. And then I'm not completely sure about the vocabulary. I can't recommend any resources. Writing, it's a little bit similar, just kind of studying the grammar. If there's any like grammar that you're unfamiliar with, studying that vocabulary, just trying to figure out if there's anything you don't know, just like trying to learn it. And then like Jennifer said earlier, I think it fundamentally sticks after you learn it.
Thank you. And what about for Jennifer? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I would like to add one comment. So I think the good resources to study for SAT, especially the reading and grammar, and to study the answers, explanation of the answers in very details, and then you can get a lot, especially on those questions you get wrong.
Yeah, that just highlights the importance of review and reflection after you do practice. Yeah, and what about like Jennifer, any recommended like reading and writing strategies, like how you learn them, as well as like vocabulary memorization?
So for vocabulary, there are so many words in the world, it would be impossible to memorize all of them. But a good strategy is to like use context clues, because like especially it's always important for reading passages to read like the top little portion that gives you like context of what the passage is about, and just like reading like around the word, it'll always give you like context clues for sure, and also just like process of elimination, honestly, for the answers.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think that's it for all of the questions. And I would just like to thank everyone who is here again for their time to join our webinar. But most importantly, I want to thank our guests, Jennifer's mom, and Katie's mom for being here and sharing your personal journeys on the SAT prep. So thank you so much again for being here today. And if you have any questions, feel free to send me a WeChat message and we can follow up our discussion over there. But other than that, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, see you.